Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, so hi everybody. Welcome to the newest of our regular meetings at the Media and Entertainment Special Interest Group at Hyperledger, and we have a special guest today, somebody with whom I had a excuse me, very long, rich and involved conversation a few months ago. The gentleman in question is Mr. Chris C., who's the founding director at Cardstack, which proudly announces itself as the world's first cooperative SaaS platform. It was a, excuse me, a project that interested me not only because of its great promise when it comes projects, for example, what is now Verify Media, but which used to be Blockchain Music and so on and so forth. So his provenance, so to speak, in the blockchain language is something that I've been following for several years. So with that, in order to explain to us exactly what Cardstack is and what it can do, I hand you over to Chris.
Thank you, David, and thank you for inviting me to this working group. We at Cardstack has been working on multiple projects, both as individuals, as company. As we mentioned, I worked on a couple of blockchain projects. The first one was Monograph, which is the first NFT platform, I think, on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then obviously Verify Media in the music space. It's a big passion of mine, trying to solve that music metadata rights distribution and royalty distribution problem using blockchain as an ingredient. Today I'm going to talk to you about the building blocks that we have learned over the years in working in blockchain and media and cloud and migration and digital transformation all together on what we kind of think is the necessary building block. It's obviously something we're working towards, but we depend on many things in the kind of DLT blockchain decentralized web ecosystem as a way to create this new creator economy, which is the focus. I actually gave a talk of the same title at Consensus, which is the blockchain conference, usually in New York, but it was virtual last year. This is an update. So this is really the second version of it. And today I'm going to focus on a couple of things that has developed since the last year. So when I gave this talk last year, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and then a lot happened, especially in the blockchain space. We've been focusing in the permissionless blockchain area around Ethereum and stuff like that. So I want to make sure that we are able to get that zeitgeist and bring it to the broader world, not only people within the kind of like tip of the iceberg of working on NFT, but also, hey, how does that affect the media businesses? Especially, I'm sure people in this special interest group has some interest in that particular area. So we're going to talk a little bit about the three I would say slices of the problem of what we believe the new creator economy includes. One is a real movement away from the platform, or at least beyond the platform, the Google, the Facebook, the Apple, and say, can protocols define a new era of tech, the way we build software, the way we distribute it, the way we share value, that would enable new opportunities. So we'll talk about what that means specifically for media. The second part is culture. We just came out of an age of the influencers, where people use the distribution platform, social network like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram to build a following. And those people are now stepping into the next age, an age of the creator entrepreneur, where they're starting to invest in company, build their own business, burger business, whatever it might be, getting away from the brand, being the voice of a brand and doing shilling on sponsored posts, and actually becoming the brand, becoming the manufacturer, and becoming not just of merch, but of real products. So we're going to look at the culture and how that affects how this creator economy and how that changes the relationship between the media the creator creates and their audiences. And then finally, Business 2.0, there's a magazine about that, but most kind of solidify in the Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, WeWork, where it's a sharing economy. Now with blockchain, especially on the value sharing and the ability to do kind of a defined economic relationship, we're seeing people thinking about cooperation. Why don't we come together and build our own network? Now, this is all experiment. They might put money together to buy an NFT, buy some art, but we're seeing some possibility of that actually defining new type of cooperation where those entities structure, call it decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO if you want, but that is really about the coordination of the tools enabled by the tech and empowered by the culture that these creatives has power, where they're coming together and forming new organization. So this is the 3 slices that we will probably talk about each one at a time. So just as a little preview, in Tech 3.0, we're going to talk about Web 3. What does that mean? What do we see at Cardstack? What would that look like to an end user so that it can kind of go and compose in using the composability of the underlying technology, whether it's protocols or smart contracts or different DID protocol working together? How do we synthesize that back to an experience that's competitive to the Tech 2.0 giants of the platform era in FANG or FAM, whatever you call them? Culture 3.0, you can't not talk about NFT. Not just the speculation and buying and selling $68 million worth of JPEG, but what is there actually? And being a person has been in a kind of digital art NFT space since 2015, I'm going to share with you the way I think about how to decompose what this NFT movement means and how does that point a direction towards where we believe media is going beyond this early speculative art trading enterprise. And then finally, we'll talk about decentralized finance to the degree that these type of capital formation and revenue sharing can allow for the creation of these replacements for the Uber and Lyfts, and certainly beyond that in thinking about Patreon and Substack. What is the Business 3.0 cooperative version of those look like? And so I'll talk in roughly in equal chunk each part of these things and our view at Cardstack, having worked on that for a long time, what it means. So if there's no any complaint, I'll go directly into Web3 composability. So one of the interesting things about Web3 as a protocol, so we are talking about not the UI aspect, but just the Web3 API pioneered by the Ethereum team and kind of adopted by even other competing DLT teams and say, hey, this is a way to inject this value layer and in some cases an identity layer onto this existing web pages by way of using additional information from the blockchain or beyond to decorate or enhance the capability. One thing that became really clear is that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to compose the primitives and the protocols in Web3 to create a new application that doesn't have to rebuild the entire infrastructure of, let's say, you're using a trading system. You can use Uniswap as a protocol and then build a new UI, a new aggregator in front of it. We're going to see that in media relatively soon, because what happens if you kind of look back at the Web 2.0 or the current platform era is that the world's creative output of this text, images, audio are basically siloed into these brands that we all know and love. And yes, it's great. If you're a creator, you get the ability to reach your audience by publishing your tweets or your post or uploading your song through Spotify, and you reach the audience. The problem is the reverse, which is the money of the audience and attention. The attention comes back with counts and stuff like that, but the money trickles down in, whether it's purchase or subscription or ad revenue in somewhat random ways and smaller than you would expect given the cultural impact of someone who has 1 million streams on Spotify. They might get $5, right? So what happens is that even more difficult than that, these kind of relationships are very, very fragile, that if you were to move into an area that the platform doesn't like, you can get deplatformed, or it could be difficult to survive an acquisition where one of these platforms gets kind of disappear from the face of the earth and all your followers goes away. So what we see is that these kind of text images and also the commercial terms of purchase and subscription can be remodeled using that composability idea that is deeply ingrained in the idea of a smart contract, but then we push that and kind of match that in the interface layer. So what that really means is not really that surprising. You can have a website, you have a modular space, and you bring different elements of these components, whether it's audio player, video players, and it's roots, whether it's decentralized or centralized storage, you bring it together. So what we've been working on is a set of design patterns, not necessarily the design. The design can be theme and skin in any way. What we call card space, using a design system called Voxel, which is using a CSS box model, the idea of composability within the web browser to figure out, can we reflect this type of composability, starting out with being able to connect the wallet. So the user and the creator and the audience creates this relationship with each other, not through this website and the database, but through the wallet, where this database as a dApp. It's just a conduit for the communication wallet to wallet, intermediated by this experience. And once you've collected a wallet to the degree that you're a creator, you can summon the edges and turn something that is just a regular web page into a fully functional no-code application. And then once you have that, you can then tap into different aspects of it and figure out which things you want to modify. And that's when we can take parameters, whether it's trivial parameters like formatting, or actually deeper parameters like pricing or restrictions that may actually require you to do an on-chain transaction to modify something. And this is all nested. So the structure that you see on the screen is actually a particular hierarchy that preserves its own boundary while allowing for a nested thing. For those that has been in the computer space long enough, this is OpenDoc, right? In a way to be able to do this kind of nesting embedding while preserving the objects itself. So if you have this ability to change the structure, you're merely changing how it's arranged in space without necessarily changing what that living in a mindful life is. And that could be going to a DLT and registering the play, like with the Audius project, or it could be mapping another new protocol we haven't seen before. So this idea of layout being separate from structure is something that I've done a lot of work in that single source publishing, XML, but seeing that the possibility of composability from that kind of document publishing world, bringing it to the web, bringing it to the rich media experience is something that was very obvious once we see the parts, and that's what we're working on now. Everything you see here is something that we have already produced in a design system and is available for use for other applications to create these kind of beautiful experiences, and you can skin and theme and you have full control because it's 100% open source. So one really big idea is this idea that once you have these media modules, that you can then create new types of module in a catalog, almost like uploading something to a source code repository or even a package registry like NPM. And then you can add new capability to this space, the same way someone can deploy new smart contracts to mainnet and then enhance the capability of the system. And this is how we can tap to that composability and bring it all together. From the user being able to tap into those things. But here's the key. The key is that there's a big change in Web 2 and Web 3, which is that as powerful as that application, that media and community experience you just saw is, it is not where the actual relationship between the creator and the audience lies. Because while you may be building this amazing consuming and contributing and creating this thing, the actual identity, the membership, the money, the financial relationship is actually captured in a wallet, which is self-sovereign and connected to each users and their participants and the creator and the audience. So, and this is the first punchline, I believe that for the building blocks for creator economy, especially around the tech, the audience portability, the fact that you connect your wallet to a dApp, and you can you can reanimate all your fans and people, your relationship, people who bought your art, people who have subscribed, someone who shared a community token, they all show up because that type of data is portable through your self-hosted wallet, your phone, as a way to port everywhere else. And if we are able to break the portability barrier of like exporting friends from Facebook and switch it to where your wallet, right, this Web3 wallet that is actually cryptographically secure and communicating various protocol is who you're bringing with you, then it doesn't really matter what experience or what no-code tool or even what custom tool. It is just evolving in the software space, but it's not locking your data in, it's not restricting your ability to grow your audience across these silos. So you're no longer in those text is here, image is there, music is there, and you're just having a multimedia conversation with your growing audience that you have a direct relationship with. So that's the first part, how Web3 we believe it. The second part around culture, and it's impossible to talk about media and blockchain without thinking about NFTs. And to people, NFT is just a thing you trade and hopefully you make some money. But as a media technologist, I've been working in the field for almost 20 years. Anytime I see a new acronym, I try to break down what it is. And we look inside an NFT and try to, tease the onion layers of the thing and identify about 10 discrete layers of what people call NFT kind of colloquially. What they're actually pointing into is these set of concepts: the transaction on chain, the proof of existence of the binary, the ownership history and the provenance, the metadata that's associated with what it is, the content itself, the media content, the GIF, the animation, the 3D file, how it's persisted, who is persisting it, who is archiving it, how is it being rendered in the player, is it on a website, can it be portable to another website, who are the participants, what kind of market, buying and selling, renting and borrowing, and then what kind of permission you get, right, with that thing. And I can tell you, most of the type of NFT that's been purchased so far, the permission is you can enjoy it. It's like an autographed picture of LeBron James rookie card, right? You have it, it's in a little glass case or acrylic case, but you don't own the right to use it in a commercial. You don't have the ability to reproduce it. You don't even have derivative rights to be able to make an artwork based on it. You just have an autographed photos that you can enjoy in your own time. But that is not necessarily always going to be true. So we think about what's happening is that the blockchain part, the DLT part, is really the ownership history, and that's valuable for the autographed copy of the LeBron James photo. But what about the other aspects of the ownership? Do you own the IP rights? Do you own the royalty stream? Is it something that gets you paid if you own 50% of this Beatles song? And then the media management, a traditional area where we have, digital asset, catalogs and stuff like that. How does that work when things has to be visible to other people? What kind of permission do we get? Do we hold back the high resolution 4K version? Maybe the ProRes version is not available to collect it, but is available to licensee using this in a film. And the part I want to focus on is the actual utility, the participant in the market and permission. I think this is the least explored part of what NFT can do. So let's break that down a little bit. So when we're thinking about the most obvious thing, which is I have an original copy, like the autograph photo, and I can prove to the world that I have permission to prove to you that I have it. And the creator, if I sell it, gets a share. And that's really cool, right? So if you sell an NFT on certain platform that's creator share, it's not really a royalty, it's really a commission of some sort, like an upside sharing, and the creator gets the stuff. But if you look at the other use case, that gets a little bit closer to what media businesses used to do. I have a license. There's a market for licenses, royalty-free, whatever it may be. There's a licensee, and your permission is to make a derivative work. There's no reason this cannot map to the blockchain DLT record, the media management, and the full res version, and the ability to interact with these things. And from a commercial, like end user retail point of view, there are membership that you can buy. Maybe you get a discount. This discount is not for this particular NFT, but anybody who owns my NFT that in the series 2 and 3 gets a lifetime 50% off my podcast subscription. That's now possible, right? And that also can be cross-owner, which is anybody who is one of my patrons. Here's all my creative friends, 20 of one of us. If you own any of our NFT, you get a automatic subscription for 1 year for our joint group or community. And that's really using the media itself as the artifact to determine what you can do with it, the utility of getting a discount or getting an access through that. And then finally, rights holder. So if you own this IP, not just the autograph photo, the actual photo itself, then maybe a music would be much easier to reason about. If I own 50% of the musical work rights of this thing, I can get a split for the next 20 years or royalty coming from the societies and stuff like that. That is currently not being done, and obviously the work that I've done in Verify Media, and it's focused on that. My work that I did with Monograph was focused on more of the art things. But I think the focus I have right now is around this idea of membership and this formation of these new entities that otherwise would not come together if not for the ability for them to make deals using code. So this is a really powerful thing. So we did some mock-up of what that might look like. So this would be creating an item in an NFT, and then you can decide what your creator share could be. You can say, I will only get 10% discount if you're a super fan, and that could be because you own some community tokens or you own some NFTs. But these kind of things go way beyond what Shopify allows you to do. And if someone say, hey, I want to sell an NFT on Shopify, well, Shopify have to think through all these things, the way it connects to addresses and deposit accounts and smart contract wallets and DAOs. But I think there's a new opportunity to use that kind of tech 3.0, the protocol, to rebuild a lot of the kind of idea of e-commerce and relationship and how to make money through these media exchanges. So that brings me to my second punchline, which is the media itself is the new merch, right? So we have been in a situation where we're musicians and whatever is relying on, even influencer, of selling physical goods, right? Or getting affiliate links for Amazon to sell you a physical box that shows up on your doorstep to make any money. But I do believe that with this digital type of goods, NFT being the very, very beginning of that, but the utility of that, like what are digital artifacts you're buying, what are the tools that allows you to do it, that allows us to think about that as the monetization. The media itself is the monetization, not just subscription access to every music, but the actual unique items that gives you different type of permission. It's kind of like a game. You buy an in-game item, you level up, you get a sword, and you can take different fights and fight different bosses. I think that type of intersection between multiplayer online role-playing games and that same group of people experimenting in public blockchain and playing these kind of numbers game, it's quite correlated, and we should look at that as a inspiration of what we can do to make media itself valuable, because not just of its scarcity and collectible value, but for what it can do for people and how we can bring people together. And then the last part is payments and how that glues it and that kind of currency in a current, in a water flow. You want to make sure that these relations of people forming actually conducts electricity, have currents through them, and those currency is a type of payments. So consumer payments is fairly easy to do. You can Apple Pay and buy a subscription on Apple One or Spotify. But the problem you have is that once you go beyond, I'm paying this person, 100% of the thing, once you have to deal with the splits, where you have to start triggering, is that, okay, I owe 10% to this thing, and then I split it between the two rights owner, and they have their own relationship, and that gets split up. This stuff gets really complicated, and from my experience working in the music industry, this is really most of the headaches. And the idea here is that this is really not a good fit for on-chain processing, right? This type of recursive bulk batch processing of many lines of statements and playbacks. So we need a different approach. And so what we've been working on with the experience of learning, it's like, how do we solve this splits problem, is to actually do something where the top line revenue, what the participant and customer spends and who they own and what goes into a pool. So this would be kind of like a black box in the music royalty sense, but hopefully much more transparent than that. And based on that, and we add this kind of on-chain action where we track what people are spending, who they're spending with, and where the top line's going. And then we use transaction history, kind of like analyzing the blockchain, and use off-chain computation, analytic technique like data science stuff, aggregation for people who are familiar with AI, machine learning pipeline, the Python ecosystem, to like get data frames and analyze them and do successive set of processing to create the proportional distribution, which then goes back on chain through a technique called Merkle payment proof, where we tell the blockchain, say, these are how much you are allowed to pay up to this amount in this period. And then you can just come as a participant to kind of pull the payment owed to you and pay the fees or the transactional fees to bring whatever's owed to you from this top line, let's say 2% or 4%, into your wallet, and you can spend it again. So this combination of on-chain action and off-chain computes allow us to have a much more credible way of going back to people who have done royalty processing as a living and say, hey, we actually took modern data science and combine it with on-chain history. And that's much more credible than say, oh, we're going to do everything through this single-threaded computer. So that's some of the things we're working on. We have actually released back in 2018 the first version of the Merkle payment proof, and now we're seeing projects like Mira or even the Uniswap people using these kind of Merkle payment proof to do airdrops. So this is kind of like reward for community, but you can imagine that these type of distribution are essentially royalty payments. based on who owns what and what proportion from a computational point of view, a data processing point of view is owed. So we are building a dashboard and a wallet called CardPay to facilitate a lot of these mechanics. The important thing is that if the users, the customers and the creators do not pay each other through the crypto rail, it's exceedingly difficult to distribute the royalty payment and the cascading through the same thing. So you have to kind of win the consumer payment way to get the money to flow this way through these protocols so that we can use the protocol to do this sophisticated rewarding. So we're working on that stuff like that. It's launching in about a month, so I'm excited to have you guys play with it. Again, it's Web3, so it's compatible with any Ethereum style wallet. We're deploying in a public permissionless chain called XDAI chain, and we aim to distribute to any EVM compatible blockchain, including the ones in the Hyperledger family. But here's my last punchline. Economic participation is new engagement. So right now we think about social media engagement of likes and favorites and subscription, but with this ability for that wallet that has your membership and also has the payment, you start inverting some relationship. You're seeing that people are selling NFTs in exchange for funding the next project, kind of like using NFT as a type of Kickstarter where the unique rare goods becomes the first thing that the superfans buy. We believe there's a lot more interesting way for fans and for people who are consuming or want to participate in community of creators to economically participate in a more substantial way than they like and stuff like that. So I think this ingredient of the economic stuff is what drawn us kind of out of our more enterprise-oriented thinking around how to help businesses that are doing media and say, you know, we gotta figure out how this economic energy is going to be channeled, and that's why we spent the last year in the public blockchain space to really figure out what's going on. So in summary, Web3, composable UI, extensible media formats, and the hosting is decentralized. Doesn't matter where it's hosted because the wallet contains the information. The NFT, they have to have new utility. Different participants will come, and there might be additional tokens or type of exchangeable assets as for the underlying rights. In DeFi, we need to process the top line so we can have a transparent payment split. And I think that idea of having media flow one way and having the value flow back in the same force, maybe more amplified, is going to be what will compel creators to move outside the little silos and boxes that the Web 2 platform containing them and actually get to this point. So in summary, we do quite a bit of these products, a first-party product like CardSpace, which is the no-code tool and the payment app itself, and the catalog for these media components, audio players and NFT modules and templates, so that we can actually help people create and launch, transact and reward, and then use that revenue and that energy to build more tools so we can complete this virtuous cycle. But we're not a product company, we're actually a technology protocol nonprofit foundation. So we hope that as we build these product experiences and perfect what people can do in payment, in building website, in sharing code, and maybe even forming new type of organization through membership, that underlying we're building the design system so they can be reused, like material design from Google allow people to compose the UI together. An application framework as you go beyond just a blockchain application, that you have the bridge existing system, how they'll look like. Some hosted service, some of them are just to provide the developer on-ramp, some of them actually provide some useful daily service you don't have to build, and then multi-chain protocols, the ability to tap into various type of ledgers. Certain things don't make sense in permissionless ledger that may make sense in an instantiation from a consortium working together. Let's say media rights is a good example. We see that more of as a private blockchain implementation than a public one. But it doesn't really matter. This is sitting underneath that abstraction of the application framework of SDK. So that's kind of my presentation thus far. I hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot of material to cover, but I'm hoping to answer any question that people have and elaborate on different parts of it.
So please feel free to unmute yourself. Who'd like to jump forward with the first question?
I have a quick question. Chris, fantastic presentation, by the way. Really tremendous grasp of your content and beautiful visuals. I have two questions. One is, how much of what you showed is actually built out and ready and able to be used? I know you mentioned a launch in a month. Are you doing beta testing already? Is there a place where we can get involved now, or do we need to wait a month? What's the position that that's in? And then I have a question about interoperability. So.
Sure. So we're starting with payment first, even though there's not particular audience. We've been working on the framework of how to do composable media, which is a hard problem independent of blockchain and DLT. Right? That's just a problem I've been working on since the R&D day when I was working for Make Media company. Think about content modularization and that's digital asset management. That's a continuation of an open source version of that vision that I've been working on basically my entire career. So we've been working on 3 versions of that. That will launch end of this year with the 3rd version, which is the compiler approach. So you can see that progress on our public GitHub, github.com/cardstack/cardstack. All of our code around the framework is open source since the history of 2015. We've been working on how to do schema-driven packaging using JavaScript and the DOM as the primary way to bring that together. So it's not like trying to force fit XML and single source publishing into the web that doesn't really want anything to do with it. So we kind of adopted JavaScript as our language so we can be more compatible with the type of experienced designers and developers that we see. So we're building something pretty deep. It's schema driven. A lot of the XSLT concept we're working on, we were part of W3C as a previous organization. It's been flattened into things that JavaScript developer that knows JSON will be comfortable with. That's ongoing. That has not stopped. It's a hard problem to solve. The protocol stuff was a bit easier once we realized that around Q4 of last year that the layer 2 chains are able to work, and then we have enough smart contract wallets and the wallet connect technology on your phone is getting good enough. We went ahead and said, let's build that economic engine, the consumer payment stuff. That's launching in a month. We just finished our audit internally for the smart contract. So once we clean up a couple of security vulnerability, not really, it's really a difference of opinions how to do the upgradable contract. Then we will open source that and we'll launch that in a mainnet basis within the next 2 months in testnet and beta with our community, and obviously broader than that, the Hyperledger community as well. Would love to get you guys get some feedback. It may look a little bit disconnected because we're just focusing on having good payment, kind of WeChat payable experience. So it's like emulating the consumer payment, but it's providing the rails to be able to do the movement of dollars through contracts and pools, revenue pools, so that we can go ahead and do the more advanced split stuff that comes as a secondary aspects of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the concept of interoperability, you interestingly said that you want to facilitate the movement of dollars. Are you facilitating the movement of specific tokens? Is it Ethereum, no Bitcoin? How are you facilitating this movement? I know you very specifically mentioned Ethereum wallets, but what is your level of interoperability that's enabled through your platform between different tokens and payment methods?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer that when you price something in a volatile currency, it's very, very unclear what your intent is. If I say that my artwork is 0.5 ETH, what does that mean? Does it mean $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000, right? So, and that is a very bad place of pricing things. You should price something, even if you want to pay for it using a volatile currency, you should price it. So the way we look at it is that there are many existing currency in the permissionless world. Stable coins like DAI, USDC, which is a stronger regulatory regime behind it and a backing of a really, really smart team and from Circle and Coinbase making that happen. So what we do is we basically bridge those tokens into these kind of faster media-oriented networks, and then they're redeemable for the underlying currency on mainnet or another layer 1 chain. So the interoperability, we're actually creating digital twins of these tokens while we're on this kind of network where we're minting new tokens that can be, when burned, redeemed for the actual stablecoin. We do allow for payment in volatile currency. So we announced an integration with an Oracle provider called Chainlink about a month ago, where we're using their feed, which is used for trading, but we're using their feed to provide mid-market foreign exchange rate with no markups. So when you're paying a customer, you can just take the the exchange rates of USD to Euro or just ETH to USD or Euro and use that to agree that that's the price you pay at that moment of the transaction, of the subscription, of the NFT purchase. So I think bringing those type of components that exist in the open loop banking, like credit card and Visa, MasterCard, and just replicating it with the tools that it has matured in the last year or so. Actually, it's only been a year that this stuff has really been available, and we start working on this protocol. Allows us to feel confident that we can be interoperable with what comes next. But right now, Chainlink Oracle, DAI stablecoin, existing Wallet Connect standard on any deployed EVM compatible chains.
Okay, fantastic. And thank you for those details. I look forward to chatting with you more offline about some other aspects that I'm curious about personally. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. We've got a series of questions coming in simultaneously on the chat and on YouTube. The first one's very basic, which I'm sure will be relevant to a lot of people, which is, what do we do if we feel we have a project that's ready to collaborate with you guys? What's the best way to contact you and propose an idea?
We've been using our Discord as a way to allow new people interested from the technology aspects of the project. Now, obviously, we are taking an approach that we are doing the first party app, basically eating our own dog food, using our SDK, using our protocol, and building AAA experiences from a design point of view, polish, app store approval, thingamajig. It's a lot to take on for a team to take on a wallet and a dApp framework and a payment protocol at the same time. But I believe that if we don't do the integration and build a consumer-facing product, it will be very difficult for us to come to a community member, come to and say, hey, we can help you build your thing. I can tell you that I've been having quite a few conversations with people coming up to me and say, I want to have this new way of building this type of licensed NFT platform. Could I use your tools? And that's all really good. People talk to me about building new types of development tools and that then enables type of on-the-fly development. That's also really interesting. But I gotta say, we don't have a lot of ability to actually support third-party teams. Our goal is to get our SDK ready, understand the use case. So I would love to have conversation to understand use case so we can plot much more precisely what are the common set of developer or third-party features that we need to get ready so we can have people build on it starting 2022. And we want to do a lot of integration this year of our parts that were mentioned, but yeah, do reach out now. It would be better for me and my team to know what people are planning to do earlier than later.
And very much in the same spirit, the question coming this time from YouTube, do you plan to have any hackathons?
I think so. I think the hackathon that's most likely to be ready to go is our CardPay SDK, which is around the payments. There's also a lot of very interesting thing about integrating new types of community structures. We're working on a commerce protocol like Shopify for Web3, which allow for discounts and for different membership where there's community token earning. That would be an interesting thing to connect to the existing ecosystem with people playing around with DAOs. I would love to have that. But I would say on the kind of smart contract protocol side, we're more ready to do hackathons.
And perhaps as a continuation of the same logic, what about enticing developers? What are you doing to make your work as interesting and alluring as possible to them?
I think it's very easy to go to an open source project, read about it, and not know what you can start. I think part of the reason we're spending so much time in building basically final product that could be a Silicon Valley funded company after 18 months is that you can look at the source code and see how we do it and figure out how you can add to it. So I think the way we entice developers is that don't worry about the product design. We have that to a degree that you can start thinking about how it integrates, how it can be augmented. We are very, very specific. I actually recorded a talk about a week ago about the different SDK. So if you're a web developer, we have the Card SDK, which is about building JavaScript and CSS that can be modular in that catalog, you can drag and drop. CardPay SDK is mostly about connecting to other protocols, maybe even things where you earn some revenue and you don't withdraw and you get a yield on it. Those are all possible. We haven't done it yet, but we invite the community who have interest in doing that type of stuff to connect our protocol and our pool and our automation to other things. And finally, the analytics stuff is also something that I'm exploring, especially people in the data science community, extremely salivating on the move away from proof of work from the Ethereum blockchain, which has, pros and cons, but the thing about it is a lot of GPU is freeing up. Wouldn't be great to use those things for actual real royalty computation. So there's an opportunity also to discuss how a developer who build algorithms that is being run on these analytic nodes using the same hardware that's deployed for Ethereum mining can actually get a cut for helping do that computation and distributing reward fairly. So these are all kind of meta answer to your thing is that I believe developer building tools that is directly attributing to new actions and new behaviors should get a tiny slice of that value. So it's not all that different than you creating a song, you're getting a slice of like a hit in the 70s, you're still getting a royalty for writing that song. I would like to see if developers can actually see this as their retirement account. I built a tool that everybody's using, an algorithm everybody's using, and therefore I'm getting 0.001% of the dollar amount being gone through the revenue pool, and that's my royalty for building this essential utility, this library that's being used. And that, I think, is a long-term sustainable question of how do you get developer involved, short of saying we're gonna give them lots of tokens, and that's disingenuous and non-sustainable. So I think this idea of a share of the economic value generated for the developer as computed by these analytic nodes is my kind of like general answer to that question.
And what about sort of the flip side of the last question, really? What about consumers and merchants? What do you plan to do to attract them?
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of focus in crypto payment to make sure you can buy coffee or pizza. I think it's completely distracting. There's a bunch of people who can't tip each other on Twitter without using PayPal and sharing their home address. We're dealing with a much bigger problem in digital payments between creators and their fans and the supporters than we are actually dealing with not being able to use Apple Pay to buy coffee, right? I think that's why our focus is almost entirely around this whole like influencer, post-influencer economy and how that becomes the new type of real, like virtual economy being bigger than digital in a physical, real world walk to your corner store economy. So that is our focus. Our focus is to understand what creator needs and how crypto doesn't become this kind of distractor, but actually becomes an enabler to the type of economic relationship we want to form. That's our absolute focus. However, our SDK is designed so they can work very much like WeChat Pay and Alipay. So we'll certainly make SDK for point-of-sale developers or manufacturer to integrate it as easily as they do any QR code scanning thing. So QR code is the main way we connect the wallet to adapt, or it could also be a terminal on a coffee shop.
Slightly more specific question, again from YouTube, which is, I'm just scrolling down the thread. 1 second. Oh, here we are. Could you please make Fabric more stable or make it stable with LTS and add a few more sample projects so that freshers like me can get up and running?
Yes, that's a question from me. I typed it.
Oh, that's from you. Oh, you typed it. Oh, I'm quoting you.
No.
I suspect.
No, I think the important thing as a developer of projects that sits on top of this ecosystem, we are extremely reliant on the progress being made in organization like in Hyperledger, where these protocol, these basic run times and building blocks are secure, stable, and usable. We are imagining use cases on top of these things, but we absolutely rely on whether that is Fabric or EVM-based chains or Bezier or whatever it might be. It's all about the more solid those things, the more we can climb higher. We rely on those foundation, and whoever said that, yes, I think the infrastructure has to get better. We can only build as tall as the infrastructure is strong. We've tried our best with what exists today, but would love to have more things in the greenhouse come into being and say, hey, DID or decentralized identity, let's use that as the foundation. We're trying to build that experience orchestration, so we want more parts and more material we can use underneath.
Once more from YouTube, 1 second. How will you make sure that merchants provide the products that customers pay for?
It's a little bit easier digitally. So with digital goods, we're actually building an inventory system. So if you say you're going to sell an NFT, I know that's a contrived example, you have to consign your NFT to a contract and lose control of it. So when you actually purchase and when the payment clears, we automatically fulfill by protocol, like fulfilled by Amazon. We actually ship it out without the involvement from the merchant. So we thought about using protocol like 0x, which is another type of protocol that has a kind of like, eBay style. So like the other person will ship it once it closes. We decided to do it at Amazon, fulfilled by Amazon style, where you actually lose control as a merchant of your inventory. Now, when it comes to physical good, there's a bunch of projects working on how do you ensure payment through a combination of wetware and dry code. Materium is one of them from Vinay Gupta. And so those are the protocols that we'll integrate to have them deal with the last mile problem to ensure that if you say you bought a gold bar, you actually have possession of the gold bar, both legally and on chain in a representational basis. For now, we're going to focus on goods that we can actually treat online as tokens or assets that we can actually use our commerce protocol as the fulfillment aspects of it. Again, Shopify doesn't control the warehouse. You can have plugins that control the warehouse, but on-chain is a bit easier to begin, especially when media is the merch. When you're actually using the media as the asset you're buying, you could do some tricks, and that's where we start with.
Quick question from YouTube. Is this decentralized and will nodes be used?
So we deploy to existing networks, so we do not run our own blockchain. I don't think it's necessary. So we deploy to EVM compatible blockchain right now. I like new programming languages. Maybe we'll do one on Clara and deploy on Bitcoin too. But right now, all our code's written in Solidity, so it's decentralized to the degree a smart contract deploy to a permissionless network is decentralized. To the degree that it needs to be federated, let's say there's a deployment to a private permission network, then that would also be decentralized to the degree of that. The most important thing about decentralization is that the code should be open and the state has to be shared. So as long as there's a DLT and the software that is the protocol and the software that's the node is open source, I believe it's decentralized enough because anybody can write their own instance and use the protocol as they see fit. With that being said, I do believe there's a value to cross-honor each other. So for example, let's say there's a protocol that say, hey, these are the 3 or 4 stable coins that we should all just recognize as good enough to be interchangeable. That would be a centralized governance function in a way in a decentralized protocol where we will recognize all these things as they're the same. So that there are some utility that we can provide to make it more easy to interact and more safer to interact for users. So there will be some governance feature that would be progressively decentralized, to say the least.
What plans do you have for advertising?
I'm a big believer that advertising make the rich richer, and it will be fantastic if advertising serves a redistribution function. So one way to do advertising, and this is something that I'm still exploring, but it's a kind of philosophy I have, is pay for the advertising in a community token. And then so that the person who wants to be front of line on the front of a top sponsored listing have to pay money, buy a token, and maybe raise its price. And then what we do at the end of that advertising being run is burn the token. Redistribute the value of what has been purchased by a powerful, rich party as a ambient denomination reduction. So everybody got a little piece of that. I think that's the right sustainable way. Otherwise, the advertising dollars keep getting to Mark Zuckerberg, and then he gets more powerful, and then what's the fun of that? So burn the advertising dollars, but let them spend it. Buy from the community, right? Through the token, raise the value of the network, burn it, redistribute the value.
Will Cardstack integrate with Cardano?
When they have smart contracts.
Can this be used for supply chain tracking?
I don't know what that means, but I think I saw the threads in the thing. I consider this this whole endeavor of decentralized commerce or like decentralized workflow to be something that is about multi-step processes. So anytime you have multiple steps you need to take, you want to change them together. Step 1, step 2, milestone 1, milestone 2. Supply chain has elements of that. Because I'm supplying goods from one port to another one, I have to keep track of them. So obviously we can put in the thread to make it happen. But what's interesting about it, even in the current version that we're going live in about a month, bridging of the token, like taking something from mainnet, kind of bringing it over the bridge, making it available, and then splitting apart and giving people prepaid balance like prepaid card to use to buy media, right? That is a digital supply chain. So it's a supply chain of tokens, right? Token suppliers, but a supply chain nonetheless. So I think what we can do, and I think what we ought to do, is I believe in finding the shape of the future solution for a particular category like supply chain by looking for the digital native version of it and then backporting it to the existing world versus injecting technology into the existing way creates work. I think there's a lot to learn about this kind of, real-time automation, chat-based, thread-based communication, automation bots. I think that's really where supply chain is going. So that if I were to say, this is crazy, I'm a creator, I want to sell something, here's a new cup, buy it, boom. Supply chain, I want someone to make the cup I just promised to ship. If that can be done through a thread, I think that's a new supply chain.
Questions from me. You mentioned Audius, the blockchain music service, a little earlier. Yes. Is that something you've been involved with?
I've not been involved in that. We've been focusing mostly on the non-consumer facing side for a long time because we're building frameworks. But I can tell you that what is very encouraging is we see a lot of projects picking one of the silos or verticals of like text, media, music, digital art, generative art, AI, and then running with it and building something. I'm a bit worried that without a protocol to bring the media back together, we're just replacing the logo of Web 2 on those silos with the logo of Web 3. That would be kind of sad. So I invite this project as we have this idea of coming with that Card SDK to wrap their players, to wrap their creation tools in JavaScript modules. We use NPM as our packaging standard, so nothing new to JavaScript developer. It's not some proprietary zip file you need to do. It's just an NPM module that we want them to open source their player so that you can compose an audience player with another player that competes with a different network, different acting model. Hard to convince the Twitter and Facebook to adopt that. Hopefully easier with people in Web3 that's actually benefited from the composability underneath it to agree that they will have composability in the UI level.
I think this might be the final question. Which industries are showing the greatest interest so far?
Desperate ones. I think the NFT market shows you that when there's new money, people who need the new money comes. I don't think Facebook is particularly or looking at crypto as somehow anything big, but I think we're going to see a resurgence of things that we believe are not good models, like journalism and subscription content. All those things were written off have a new start. The same way we thought e-commerce were written off until Amazon just grew like crazy. So I think looking at things that's been abandoned on the wayside of the road and see if those things can come. And I see a lot of IP licensing opportunity here. And I'm hearing a lot of noise around that, and people want that. They want those relationship affinity that they know. So I think there's going to be a really interesting mixture between creator, brand licenses, and new type of products, both digital and that come into play. So I would say the type of e-commerce second phase of e-commerce is really where we're seeing the greatest kind of chaos in a way, control chaos, but I think that's going to bubbling up as a real force to deal with because that's what people want to buy. They don't want to buy another crappy iPhone lightning cable, right? Whatever color it comes in.
Well, on that rather pessimistic note, thanks very much, Chris. It's been a very rich talk, as you can tell from the questions, so thank you equally to those people who attended and who posed those questions. And with that, I wish you a very good day.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time.
Thanks a lot.
I'll just add that if anybody wants to continue the discussion, please join the Media and Entertainment SIG's mailing list, and that's a great place to post additional questions and to share other thoughts and comments.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Yeah.